Good evening. Are you glad to be here this evening? We missed everyone Sunday. We got to, I guess you got to sleep in if you slept in, but do it. Thank the Lord for the weather we did have. They could have been much worse from what they were calling for. I do have some friends that have been without power for 5 days in Nashville, and it's been a very, very cold week there. So I'm sure any day now, any moment now, they may have the power right this moment. I don't know, but just pray for them. Lord will keep them. I want to speak on a subject that all of us should be, I'm certain all of us are familiar with. Have you ever prayed a prayer that felt urgent only to feel like God showed up late? Have you? You needed an answer, or at least you thought you needed an answer right then and there. But the Lord made you wait. You prayed for healing, but the diagnosis came back even worse. You prayed for restoration, but the relationship ended anyway. And you prayed for provision, but the bills were still overdue. And if we're honest, we don't usually admit it, but deep down we may have even thought, God, where were you? In John chapter 11, that's exactly where we find that story, a family that Jesus loved dearly. Mary, Martha, and their brother Lazarus. They sent an urgent urgent message to Jesus in John 11:3. Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. They didn't ask if Jesus would come. They didn't feel the need to explain the situation. They just wanted to remind him of the need and the love that he had for him. They were certain that Jesus would rush to the bedside, but he didn't. In John 11:6, when he had heard, therefore, that he was sick, he abode 2 days, still in the same place where he was. So here Lazarus is dying, and he just waited 2 more days. Took his time and did what he wanted to, at least in the minds of some other people, but at least in the mind of those that, well, where's Jesus at? Well, he's not where I need him, right where I need him. But he let him wait. Lazarus died. He was buried. And by the time Jesus arrived, he was 4 days late. Or at least that's what it seemed like. In John 11:5, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. The delay was not caused by a lack of love. He loved Lazarus, Mary, and Martha, but yet he still waited. We oftentimes feel that if God loves us, there's an immediacy that we feel that he should be there right then and there. Something's happened, I need God to show up right now. And there are times where he will show up then and there. There are times of need where someone spoke recently about being in an accident, and all you can say is the word Jesus. There are times where he'll show up in a moment's notice, but there are times that he does allow us to wait. Mary and Martha, they likely expected Jesus to heal Lazarus before he died. After all, Jesus had healed strangers, and surely he would heal his friend. But Jesus was not interested in preventing death. He had something else he needed to do. He needed to display the resurrection power. I've heard of a story, and you've probably heard the same, where a child would ask their mother why a butterfly needed to stay in a cocoon. And I've heard a story where that child tried to help that butterfly out of that cocoon, and that butterfly did not last. And the reason being, if you know the science behind it, that the struggle was necessary. They have to struggle to leave that cocoon in order to sustain life. Sometimes God's delay in our need and our situation is required for our own development. In John 11:39 through 40, Jesus said, "Take ye away the stone." Martha, the sister of him that was dead, saith unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. And Jesus said unto her, Said I not unto thee, that if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God? What a terrible smell that must have come from that grave. He had been dead 4 days. How many here has driven down the road and there's an animal that had been hit, or a skunk that had been hit? How many has had that smell or that aroma get in their car? Huh? All of us, right? Well, that smell, you want to get to that fresh air. You want to roll the windows down and get to where there's fresh air and clear that car of that smell. So you know what it's like. That smell is unforgettable. Well, that's what they were dealing with. Lazarus, again, was a good friend of Jesus, but he was dead. Jesus had been notified to come quickly, but he did not get in a hurry. The news of this sickness was no surprise to Jesus, nor was it even troublesome to him. He knew that he would eventually die and be buried. Yet Jesus continued on for 2 days before he headed to the home of Lazarus. Now, Lazarus' name, does anybody know what his name means? Any scholars in here? Well, I did not know, so I am not a scholar, but I did look it up. Lazarus' name means assistance of God, or to whom God helps, pointing to the fact that no matter where we live only by the help of God. We have no power within ourselves. We can't do anything without God's help. He lived in the town of Bethany, which also has a meaning, the house of affliction. Everywhere you turn in this life, there is sickness, pain, death, depression, discouragement, and constant trouble. Have you managed to live a day in your life where there wasn't some kind of trouble knocking at your door? We all have something going on at every moment of every day, something that's trying to maybe not just take over us, but something that may be just bothering us. There's affliction in every moment. Our minds at times will make things seem so hopeless that there doesn't seem to be any possibility of getting our prayer answered. We tend to talk amongst ourselves in our own mind and make things worse than it is. Well, if this don't happen, this is going to happen. Well, we worry ourselves to death sometimes. No one is immune to the attacks of Satan. However, it is not always the devil's fault for our mindset. Although he often gets the blame, we at times are the cause of our own troubles that we find ourselves in. He gets the blame probably just about every time. Well, the devil did this, the devil did that. Well, you may have been the one that made that poor decision to buy something you shouldn't have bought. You may have been the one that went somewhere you should have had no business going. So sometimes, although the devil gets the blame, it's not him. We cause some of the troubles ourselves. I want to point out the attitude that Jesus had when he heard the news of Lazarus. He knew that he was dying, but it didn't seem to affect him at all. He just kept doing the work that he needed to do. He didn't get upset at all, because he already knew what was going to happen when he got to Bethany. He knew that there was nothing impossible, and that his power to speak resurrection was not limited to any kind of circumstance. It would help us greatly to realize or even be reminded that our seemingly hard or impossible circumstances are nothing to God. His power is not limited by our faithlessness or our hopelessness. Jesus has resurrection power, and he can not only bring victory when we haven't given up hope, but he is also just as able to bring victory even after we've long given up hope. When it seems that our finances have already died and the stink is beginning to rise, when it seems that our health is completely gone and the doctors are giving up on us, when it seems that God has waited too long and the stink of our unbelief, distrust, hopelessness rises, that is when Jesus is ready to show his power. Isaiah 55, 8 and 9. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than yours. So are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. When Jesus finally arrived, the family of Lazarus was long past having hope. They had had their funeral, they had given up. Lazarus was dead, buried, and his grave sealed. Now I imagine in verse 20, Martha ran to Jesus, because in verse 20 it says, Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary sat still in the house. Martha said, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. And Mary later repeated the same thing in verse 32. This was not rebellion, but it was grief that was speaking. And it wasn't necessarily unbelief, but it was disappointment. Both of them still called him Lord. Faith in God doesn't mean you're not going to have questions. It doesn't mean that you're not going to wonder why something is happening, why you're going through something. Faith means you bring your questions to Jesus, not away from him. Not talking down, well, the Lord's letting me go through this, or this happened. If we're Debbie Downer at work and we're so-called Christian, then what kind of witness is that? We need to bring our questions. It's all right to question. It's all right to wonder, Lord, why are you letting me go through this? But we need to have the right attitude and the right mindset when we think those things. You can still love Jesus, but still struggle with his timing. Martha had believed that Jesus could heal Lazarus. She knew that it could be done. She just didn't believe he could do anything now, because it was too late. God, I believed you then, but now it's too late. My problems have gotten too big. My family is destroyed. Satan's greatest lie that he always tries to use in those moments, he whispers in our ear, it's over. There's nothing God can do about it now. He's not able to. If Satan can get you to give up on God, then he has accomplished his goal. That whisper should be our first indication that God is not finished, because the devil cannot speak truth. God's answer is still coming in his own time and in his way. We just need to keep on trusting and having faith. At times, your prayer may seem that it will never be answered. The situation has lasted for years. We distress over finances, relationships within our families, and any number of things that God, we think, has turned a deaf ear to. Things have gone from very bad to much worse, and now there is no visible way to make things right. The reason is because we try to solve that problem ourselves. We try to picture well, this is how I can get this person saved. Well, this is how I can reach this family member. Well, this is how I can get out of this debt. We try to picture our own way out of it instead of leaning on the Lord. Why does Jesus let us go so far before he comes? Why must we sometimes get so deep into trouble and our attitudes begin to stink before he comes to our rescue? There's a lesson to be learned. It's only when Jesus speaks the word of deliverance that the victory will come, and not until then. It will come in his time and in his manner and his will. God cannot bless a heart of unbelief. Fear is doubt and the opposite of belief. We must believe God, trust in God, and look to God before he will speak that resurrection power into our circumstances of life. Hebrews 3 and 12. Take heed, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. That unbelieving, doubting, fearful, distrusting, disloyal heart has left the place of the living in God's blessings and has entered into the place of death unto God and into the place of sin, of death and sin. I believe that God wanted everyone who stood near there to experience that smell of death because he wanted them to know that he truly was dead. There was no more life in Lazarus. That is why he waited until that point of stench, if you will. Jesus wanted everyone to know that it was not by the power of human flesh that resurrection and deliverance would come, but by the power of an almighty God. There would never be a doubt that God's resurrection power was what brought him back to life. God will share this glory and with no one. He doesn't want no one else getting credit for what he's done. He doesn't want us to think, well, we got ourselves out of our situation. He wants the glory. If he's done something for us, we need to acknowledge what he has done for us. Yes, he had been dead 4 days. He had been wrapped and prepared for the grave, because it was, and it still is, the custom of the Jews to bury their dead on the same day that they die to avoid breaking the law concerning the handling of a corpse. By Jewish belief, the soul lingered near the body for 3 days. On the 4th day, decomposition was undeniable. Hope would be officially gone. And that was why Martha said, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. In other words, Jesus, this is too far gone. It's past fixing. Nothing can be done. But what we, in our minds, call too late, Jesus calls right on time. God often waits until the situation is beyond human repair, so he alone can get the glory. We wonder why things get so bad, but sometimes if it doesn't get bad enough to where there's no other way out but by him fixing it, that would be the only way some people would believe that he fixed it. We sometimes we don't want to go through, Sister Kim. You didn't want to go through what you went through a year or so ago. I'm not sure how long ago it's been now, but a year at least, I think. You didn't want to go through that. But the Lord allowed it to get to the point that it did so people could witness the healing power that he has, what he can do. If Jesus had healed Lazarus before he died, it would have just been another miracle. It wouldn't have been nothing special, no. But raising him from the dead, not from the day he died, but from 4 days later, that would leave no doubt only God could do this. Martha in verse 24 said, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. But Jesus had replied to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Hope is not dead because your situation is dead, and life is not gone because your dream is buried. As long as Jesus is present, resurrection is always possible. Psalms 139, 7 through 12. Whither shall I go from thy spirit, or whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend up into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, even the night shall be light about me. Yea, the darkness hideth not from me, but the night shineth as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike unto thee. He may not answer your cry. He may not bring deliverance in your time. He may even allow it to become dead, buried and sealed away, but he will come when the time is right. Jesus was 4 days late in answering the prayers of Mary and Martha. He was 4 days late in the healing of Lazarus so that he would not die. He was 4 days late in the hope that all those who stood around could last, and they see the witness of that. In verse 35, John 11 and 35, anybody know what that is? Jesus wept. So right after this had happened in verse 35, it says Jesus wept. Now, why would he weep? He knew that Lazarus was going to be raised from the dead. He knew what the outcome was going to be, but yet he still wept. He is not unmoved by our grief. Even when he has a plan, he knows what he's going to do, he knows what he's going to bring us through. He still, as you said, has compassion for us. Jesus may not always prevent pain, but he will guide you through it. Your tears matter to God. Your sorrow is seen, and your grief is not ignored. Jesus comes to the tomb and gives an unexpected command in verse 39. Take ye away the stone. Now, why wouldn't he just move it himself? He had the power to do it. Why not just do it? Because miracles often require obedience before manifestation. We have to obey. We have to do our part in order to get what we expect from God. God will do what only he can do, but he will ask us to do what we can do. That stone that day, it represented fear, doubt, bitterness, excuses. But before Jesus called him out, he called on those people to act in faith. And then in verse 44, and he that was dead came forth. Jesus didn't whisper. He didn't just nicely say, Lazarus, come out. He didn't struggle. It wasn't a hard, he didn't have to repeat himself. He spoke and death obeyed. If Jesus hadn't clarified Lazarus, I believe every grave would have emptied. That's the power that he had, When God calls your name, what is dead has to respond. What Jesus calls forth cannot stay buried. You can try to bury something and hide it. If he calls it forward, it's coming out of that ground. Our dreams, our purpose, our faith, our hope, we may think it's 4 days late, but he's 4 days right on time. And before closing, I want to point out one more thing. Lazarus comes out of that grave, but he's still bound in clothes that wrapped him tightly. And Jesus gave one final command. Loose him and let him go. Some of us are alive, but yet we may still be wrapped in old habits, shame, fear, troubles that we just don't want to let go of. But Jesus don't want us to just be alive. He wants us to be free as well. Jesus didn't rush. He didn't try to explain himself to the crowd. He didn't say, excuse me, let me get this taken care of. But he revealed something greater than just healing. He revealed his glory. John 11:4, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God. If God seems late in your life, 1, he has not forgotten you, and 2, he has not abandoned you. And most importantly, he certainly has not lost control. Even though we may be facing something, he is still at the reins. He's positioning us for a moment of resurrection. Jesus was 4 days late, but yet he was right on time. God's will is sovereign. We don't need to give up hope. And even when it seems hopeless, God is still in control. He has the power to resurrect our life once again and bring deliverance and victory with whatever we're going through. He may not answer it in our time. He may let us struggle. It may be to what we feel like is our breaking point, but he'll be there right on time. He may not deliver you when you expect him to, and he may not give you the answer you want, but he will be on time. The only thing we have to do is in John 11:26, Jesus said, believest thou this? We just need to believe. We need to know that what we're going through, although it may be hard and we don't want to go through it, it makes us uncomfortable, it makes us, I don't know what else the word I want to say, but it puts us in a place of uncomfort. But that's exactly where he wants us to be in order for us to grow. Because 4 days late is exactly when Jesus does his best work. We want it now. That's always our mindset. I've said it before. You've heard it by other people before. We always want it now. We want the answer now. But that's not what we need. We need to learn to depend on him. If he gave us everything the moment we asked, we wouldn't have no faith. We would have an easy life, I guess, and there would be no reason to have faith to carry on. We would say, Lord, I need a glass of water, and a glass of water would appear. Now, he can do that, but the fact that he doesn't and we have to put forth an effort is good for us. It's good for our spiritual soul. At this point in time, I'm going to dismiss this portion, Sister Kim, and I'm going to ask